Hey everybody, this is Dr. Flight, and this video will be relatively short, and it's just going to be a very brief overview of digital and new media. So this is a very evolving, fast-changing topic, of course, because the way we communicate has moved well beyond the traditional mediums in terms of advertising and communicating and building awareness with our market space. So when we think about traditional media, we focus on things like print, magazine, newspaper, uh, signage, those types of things. There's also traditional electric media, which would include radio and TV. But beyond that, there is a whole host of new ways that people get information through digital technologies. These might be mobile devices, they may be computers, or some other digital interface. And so naturally, if people are getting information through these digital services and digital hardware pieces, then they offer opportunities for us to communicate our messages, which may be advertisements and such. So, pushing beyond traditional media, digital media adds a lot of pros to the whole process, and picks up some of the benefits of all the medias that preceded digital. So, this is just really a brief, time-sensitive talk about digital and new media as we move forward. Okay, so we're going to get started and talk a little bit about new media. Now, new media is a reference to media that would otherwise be not non-traditional or not non-traditional. So, like there's this traditional media that we think of as traditional print or traditional electronic, which would be radio and TV, and then we have magazines and newspapers and things like that. And then there's a term called non-traditional, where we're talking about things like transit media. So that would be media like on buses and in airplanes and bus stations and subway stations and stuff like that. The Yellow Pages is a non-traditional one. Of course, the Yellow Pages don't really exist anymore. Billboards, signage, those types of pieces would be non-traditional as well. And so now, though, with digital technologies, we have an era called new media. And the thing to remember is that traditional media has certain pros associated with it. So, for instance, print media has something called it has a lasting effect where once it's in print, you can keep it, and it's a permanency effect, that it's always there. You can always look at it and pull it back up. So, like people who advertise in magazines, and those magazines find themselves into doctors' offices, allow people and waiting rooms, the waiting room magazine, it allows people to look at those ads over and over and over again. Um, Traditional electronic, though, has this idea where it's something called fleeting, where the advertising can be very effective because it uses audio and visual effects, but it's fleeting in the sense that it's on and then it's off. So an ad is 30 seconds, and once it runs, it's over. There's no permanence to it. Well, new media has elements of both and other features that sort of combine the best of print and the best of electronic, but it does so in a digital way, which allows us to really, really focus our messaging on very specific and narrow audiences. So this is really important because in today's environment and with big data and with the capacities that we have with artificial intelligence and algorithms and things like that, we can drive our message to very, very small audiences, and we can create unique messages based on individual consumer preferences. So this is like a really new concept in the relative sense of time and advertising. So this is stuff that the digital area can do. Now, term interactive marketing is absolutely not true. We've had, or not new, we've had interactive for years. So telephone marketing, for instance, is interactive. Door-to-door marketing or sales is interactive. Even the areas of catalog sales and television selling is direct, and it can be interactive as well. So again, internet digital technologies create opportunities to glean the benefits of all these former means of communication in one place and in one way. So interactive marketing then today is often internet driven, and it's devised as a relationship between the recipient and the sender, where communicate or information is sent back and forth between the two, and customized messages are possible as a result of the information that the consumer is able to give to the sender or the firm in this case. What also adds a little bit of element, which adds a twist or element to the interactive part today, is that consumers have more control over the messaging. So in the past, the sender or the firm or company would have a message and they would send it in one direction and the receiver would receive it. But now with digital technologies, the consumer has far more control in the message that they want to receive, when they receive it and how they receive it, and so on. So again, there's like a control issue here, but there are many elements of former media that all roll into the new media sort of technologies that we see. As a result, when we think about classifying, this media, it's not just the sender or the firm creating a message, it's a co-creation of message. And so it's difficult to understand whether this messaging then is mass media because it's going to lots of people, but it's also going to each individual person as a self, or each individual person as a specific market, and it's customized. So we throw in this element of customizability to our messaging, but we're doing it on a mass scale. We're sending out millions of messages. Each one of those could be customized, though, based on the digital footprint that the consumer leaves. Okay, obviously this is growing at a phenomenal rate. We know that the numbers are increasing. We'll look at some of those a little later on when we look at apps and social media type stuff. But clearly the force of digital media and interactive digital is here to stay, and we're not going to go back to other ways of communication. The other forms of communication probably won't ever go away, but the prominence of them and the effectiveness of them will certainly wane and diminish over time. So moving forward, we kind of think about like different ways we can communicate in a digital form. And so back in the early 90s, 1994 or 1993 or so, the first viable websites were available. The internet was available through dial-up on a consumer level, and that's when websites began. We began producing or providing information over the internet through a website. Eventually, in the mid and late 90s, we got a little bit better at doing commerce on the internet, where we could maybe take orders and do transactions on a website. And obviously, the technologies and the speed, and we added video at one point. And in the early days, when you advertised on a website, first of all, your company might have a website just for static information, but then we created ways to have banners, for instance, or static ads that would show up on a website. And then obviously we've progressed from there quite a bit. So first and foremost, we usually start this conversation with websites and just static websites and sort of what the benefits are of each of these types of things. And so the content obviously has always been important on a website, but then there are a variety of other things. The commerce and the community are ones I like to highlight quite a bit in the sense that community is something that has continued to develop in various formations outside of a static website, and obviously commerce has as well. And our ability to do business in a digital or online environment has exploded in a lot of different ways. Okay, so again, you can review the textbook and look at these different kind of elements associated with online static websites. And then you can also think about also making decisions about online advertising as well. And again, this harkens back to older uses of the internet. So again, early 80s or early 90s, excuse me, mid 90s, even into the 2000s. These were still fairly new things, but display ads, having a banner or an interstitial ad is a term you may hear from time to time. It's an ad that appears between like websites or in between changes, an ad will pop up. So that might be that. Sponsorships, search ads, so positioning themselves through Google, for instance, or search engine advertising, those types of things. The Google model of being able to place an ad as a result of an appropriate search. Email, I don't know that we do email anymore. So it's funny that email is something that we still talk about a little bit, but it's almost like texting hasn't quite gotten this to the point where we're willing to accept um, advertisements or messaging, corporate messaging through texts, but we're getting there. It's getting closer and closer, and that would be the next equivalent. So direct messaging, or instant messaging, or texting would be the new, generations, I guess, of the email, which we may be able to use, and leverage to some extent if people get a little bit more behind it. Other big area that we talk about is mobile, like mobile growth, mobile, yeah, types of things. Um, Currently, at this point, over 6 billion text messages are sent daily. 7 years ago, 41 million had been text. So you think of the growth rate over the last 5 or 6 years. It's huge exponential growth. Obviously, we have the direct messaging capabilities. Um, Application to person, and again, this is the we have an app, and then that app sends us texts and updates and notifications and things like that. So that's obviously kind of a big deal now. And if we can get app downloads, then that's even a bigger deal, because we loop ourselves into the kind of the structure of the recipient's life if we're able to do that. Another area that has grown, within this is the whole commerce part of doing commerce and doing business electronically and digitally. And again, this has happened extremely rapidly. So, and it's continuing to evolve every month, every quarter. We have new innovations on how we can integrate our spending and consumption patterns in a digital environment. So ways to store money, spend money, different types of currencies that are available now. Certainly all lend themselves to the mobile or changing environment. The other thing I'll say about mobile that's not on here is the whole GPS and geolocating capabilities of being able to track where the consumer is. And it used to be even like, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, 2005 to 2010, I would say, in that range, we were talking about the new technology allowing us to push messages to consumers based on their location. So for instance, if a consumer's walking walking in the mall and they walk by a store, having that store push a message to their phone indicating what their sales are for the day, even though the customer hasn't walked in the store, they've just simply walked by it, and the geolocation of their phone tells the the app or the technology that, hey, we're close to the store. Why don't we push them a message and maybe we can get them into the store by doing so. So even like 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about doing that, and we're still working through some of those things that could be developed in a more effective way. But so the whole mobile GPS, the commerce on the go types of things are absolutely booming and really, really cool growth areas that we can deal with or that we can develop and move forward with. Transaction values then in a digital environment. A graph often tells, or a picture tells 1,000 words or whatever. The growth year over year. If we think back just 5 years ago, we were right at about $100 billion in revenue. That'd be annually in m-commerce or mobile commerce environment. So 5 years ago, we were at 100 million. This last year, we're at close to 700 billion. So a 7-time increase, 700% increase in the last 5 years on dollars spent in a mobile environment. So yeah, the dollars certainly speak to the efficiency and the effectiveness and the comfort level that people have now with not using hard currency, moving to a mobile environment, and trusting the system that we certainly have. So geolocation marketing is a big deal. And this goes to this topic of being able to, be willing to be tracked, first of all, and then us harnessing that information and then pushing messages to customers who opt in and aren't concerned about privacy and things like that, pushing messages for location appropriate promotions and messages. And that's kind of a cool thing that we're certainly doing. But social media, though, is another twist of the whole digital marketing area. And so social media is very different. It's not the same as websites. It's not the same as really apps in a lot of ways, even though social media does use apps as a technology. The specific purpose of social media is to allow strong peer-to-peer environments. So peers or people are creating content which is then shared and then consumed by other people. So we think about like B2C with business to consumer like environments, or B2B where we have business to business transactions happening. So now though, focus on P2P or peer-to-peer environments where the producer and the consumers are both people, or they're not businesses. And factor into that the idea that businesses want to be in that environment because that's the social structure that is of today. And we know that consumers are talking about us, but they're talking to each other about us as far as businesses go. So social networks are very different then. They're not like you don't put them in the same mix as a communication tool that would be used like any other type of communication tool. It's not an advertising piece at all. But if you go back to the website concept, one of the check marks I had was this idea of brand community or social community that's established in a digital environment. And that's what social networks do. They create communities of shared interests. And so people get together and talk to other people about things that they're interested in together. And the idea of a community then, or I'm going to extend it, a brand community, is one where we're able to talk about a brand together as a group of people, and that's what we want to create. If we're going to create a social network, or if we're going to interact in a social network, we want to think of it as a community of self or of same interests, going on together. Now, obviously, when we're in this space, the firm doesn't have control of messaging. People do, because it's a P2P environment. So we lose control, and it's a little bit like public relations. PR and public relations, one of the hallmarks of it is that the firm doesn't have control over the message. The control over the message is whoever's delivering the message, and in PR that might be a newspaper or a reporter or somebody like that. This is the same type of thing. We take this idea that others are in control of our message, and we hope that they spread good news about us, but we don't always have access to what that is. So social media then is a very big challenge to harness the benefits of, but respect the idea that it's not a traditional means of communication for a firm, and we've got to treat it very differently than a directional. We're creating a message and we're sending it out to the consumer. It's not that, and so we have to respect that. But last couple slides, just mentioning here the growth of social medias and media platforms. I think it's clear that like mobile or other interactive digitals, they're growing at phenomenal rates. And so this is pulled off of new information from Hootsuite, which is an organization that helps people manage messaging over multiple social media platforms. So if we look at digital use from around the world, how many people are using digital? Over 7.5 billion people using digital. We have unique phone users, so we have mobile users, and then we also have internet users, and then people who are active on our socials. So this is a digital media representation. So we have 3.8 billion people, so 49% of the world's population on some type of social media or social activity or social sites. So just keep that number in mind. We nearly double that. Well, yeah, we double that for the total population, but we still have a big area of people who are phone users who don't use social media and so forth. What's interesting though is where this growth can come from, and who's using this technology. So Facebook is by far the bigger or biggest used or most used platform out there. Still, even though depending on who you are, you may not use Facebook at all. In fact, the Facebook model is probably viewed as older now, or an old model, and maybe it's out of date for its usefulness. WhatsApp is certainly a big deal from a worldwide perspective. I know Instagram from folks talking how quickly TikTok has grown from out of China. As well. Snapchat and Twitter are still down there. Pinterest is still down there as well. Many of you may not be familiar so much with WhatsApp, but it's more of a global brand. It's used much more over the Mideast and in Europe than it probably is here. In terms of growth around the world, where are the markets where people are not using digital technologies, but where there is future growth? Certainly Southeast Asia huge populations. We have billions of people in that area, as well as Eastern Asia, Middle East, big areas. Africa is largely open to a lot of growth opportunities for where this technology is going. So really interesting. You know, we think of our market, of course, but our market's pretty saturated if we think about North America. Um, in terms of how many people use socials and the ubiquitousness, the everywhereness of socials here. And if you're going to grow, if you're looking for new market growth, you know, in this area, then certainly Asia and Africa are the places you probably want to be and be at. Okay, wrapping this up, we've spent a good amount of time then talking about social media and the technologies we have available to us. We also spent a lot of time just in referencing digital and interactive technologies, why they're beneficial, kind of the distinction between interactive digital with traditional media and some of the growth trends and expectations of that. Last thing I'll do is mention that, you know, while socials and digital is everywhere, it's still something that we need to focus on when we segment our target markets. So when we look at a target market, you know, part of our evaluation of them and the profile we create needs to be their proclivity and their interest towards digital messaging, and how they're going to receive messages and how likely they are to respond to messages, you know, in this way. And you know, we could throw in traditional media on here, like how many people and what are the demographics of people who watch TV and watch TV ads and read magazines and so on and so forth. So extending this and saying, well, look, we need to make sure we're on a media that reaches our target market. Same principles of that concept exist in socials, or if you're going to do search engine advertising or anything like that. Same principles apply in the digital world as they do everywhere else. So in this case, we can see, well, look, you know, like this happens to be U.S. adults. So with lots of different demographic features. So household income is there, education is there, urban, suburban, rural living is there. And then we look at what percentage of people who fall into any one of these demographics are who use social media as it's outlined here. Now we know Facebook and YouTube are the most used, right? So they have the highest percentages across the board. We can look at age brackets. You know, it's kind of a knee-jerk predictability thing that, yeah, 18 to 24-year-olds probably use the most social media across the board. 78% use Snapchat. So that's kind of interesting. And then of course it drops down from there. You might be interested to find there very little distinction between 25 to 50-year-olds in YouTube. There's virtually no difference, in fact, and even that with Facebook as well. Fairly high percentage, 50 to 65-year-olds using Facebook. 78% use Facebook. So you know, I know there's this kind of reaction of, well, the older generations might not use social media as much. It's really not true. The type of social media they use is different than younger people, and younger people again are using maybe the apps that are coming up that are newer, and a lot would argue that the newer apps are being designed and positioned towards them. So in other words, it's not that younger people are more active on social media, it's the social media is being designed towards them at a higher rate. That's probably the thing that's going on, and a lot more of a logical argument to make. Okay, so anyways, This wraps this up. If you have any questions, please, for sure, just shout out to me, email me, or call me, or send me a direct message, and that would be pretty awesome. So, yep, just let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Talk to you soon.